Hello, and welcome to the Irth Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Adams. Today, I'm excited to speak with our guest. Khrysanne Kerr is the Vice President of Marketing and Outreach for the Common Ground Alliance. Khrysanne has been in damage prevention for more than 25 years and has been working with the Common Ground Alliance for the past 17 years. Her voice is often heard all over the United States as she continues to spread the importance of damage prevention. I've known Khrysanne for more than 20 years and can't wait to catch up today. Welcome, Khrysanne.
Hey, Jason, it's good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those that are new to the conversation, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey in damage prevention?
Sure. It's enlightening when you look at the span of years that we've known each other, and where we've come from to where we are now. Basically, we met each other when I started as the Assistant Director of Marketing for the Ohio Utilities Protection Service back in the late 1990s. At that time, it was still dial-up modems and sending guys out to locate lines and new developments because there was no trajectory to get new plant from going in the ground into the mapping database, and watch how all of those protocols evolved, and ramped up into the Director of Marketing, where I held that title for a decade at the Ohio Utilities Protection Service, now Ohio 811. And at that time, your company was centralized in Columbus, and, we had the same common goals of better software, better technology, and moving the needles of damage prevention. And, from there, I left and took a consulting position at a company called Solaritas Technologies out in Kansas City. And the main driver for that, Jason, was I knew that this organization called the Common Ground Alliance was releasing a project manager position to build the new 811 Call Before You Dig campaign. And I knew I wanted that position. I knew that was something I wanted in my life. And, fortunately, I was hired to do that. And we launched 811 in 2007. And on the day we launched it, I was offered a full-time position and haven't looked back at my role with the Common Ground Alliance.
Wow. Yeah, it's a fun journey. Those early days, I think it's often sometimes overlooked because we've made so many strides in damage prevention. Like even in our course of time, you're right. I was just telling a story as I've been working with new people, how our biggest challenge early was making the ASCII bell ring correctly on the printer as a ticket came across. And now today we're talking about managing millions of points of data so we can make better predictions. It's amazing to watch how technology's really kind of changed our industry. But to have done it in such a short window, it's really cool to see that and see the benefits. I think, what do you think is the biggest evolution you've seen since you've been in this industry for so long?
That's a hard one when you look at it in totality. Early on, Ohio was such a big driver in the mapping. And, you look at the evolution now to when we talk about mapping in our CGA's 50 and 5 initiative and what our members are doing from, cradle to grave and real-time as-builts. It's been awesome to watch the increase in efficiencies. But I'm probably incredibly partial to the launch of the 811 campaign for public awareness. In the first 10 years, we reduced damages by 50%. That's huge strides to make when you look at every state has their own law, their own marketing campaign, their own concepts and goals. And, we kind of got this to be the team logo and everybody to grind together to get to that next level. And, I look back on when we launched that in 2007 and 10 years later, never in a million years did I ever envision hot air balloons and NASCARs and, half of the country's one-call centers using it as their brand. But I think it really galvanized the industry. And I think that was so critical to have that footprint that we could build upon for everything else.
Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, it's hard when you try to explain to your friends and family what you do, and they didn't have any kind of way to connect to it. Right. And then now to think, when I say, hey, 811, people know it. It's like the total stranger said, oh, I've seen that logo, or I understand it. When you talk about NASCAR, you talk about the success in horse racing, the branding opportunities, all which are really incredible. But to me, it really says there's an organization behind this that represents all of these people. And so it's nice to have the branding. But I know, like in your walk, you're probably managing relationships with thousands of members. How do you do that every day?
You know what? You listen with big ears. It's one of the things I take great pride in. Each one of our members is doing the right thing. And I think it's fascinating when you look at our 16 stakeholder groups. People who should be butting head in the real world, but they come to the table, take off their hard hat, baseball cap, sit down and want to get to that same common ground. And, I think it's omnipresent of CGA's robust staff now. I mean, I used to have staff meetings by looking in a mirror. People, that sounds like a good idea. We should do that. But we've watched how the organization grows. And, now we have 14 employees and we're visible. We're out there. I also think CGA reinvented itself during the pandemic. I mean, Zoom meetings and virtual conferences and all the things we were able to accomplish without leaving our desk chair and getting in an airplane seat. Really helped us get out there and connect, not only locally, but with, Comgas in Brazil. And, you and I participated on, a fact-finding mission with them and learning about the challenges that they had. And, Canada, Australia, all of a sudden during the pandemic with technology, the world became a lot smaller and we were able to really connect. And I think everybody was so isolated. Those meetings were very important to building our long-term relationships.
Yeah, I mean, without a doubt. I mean, the CGA has made such a significant impact in damage prevention. I mean, you can just kind of go down the list as you say it. I think public awareness has been absolutely and entirely subject that wasn't really kind of talked about on a national level, since we're so isolated, like a state level so many times, that the CGA was the first vehicle that we could talk about this in in the entire concept of not just the United States, but across the world, as you're saying. So like you're saying, our opportunities in Brazil and different states only really became aware when the brand of the CGA was shown that this can really change an industry, can make us safer. I'm curious, one of the, I think, amazing launches that the CGA has done in recent memory is the CGA conference. I know as a vendor that participates in the conference, it's a most valuable event that we have on our calendar. It is our anchor. It's where we really want to spend our resources to invest because we see it's our best area for return. Tell me a little bit about the CGA conference. And if I'm not mistaken, you're seeing incredible growth. Can you give me a little insight on that?
Sure. Face-to-face meetings are back with a vengeance. We talked about, we used the time we could during the pandemic to make sure we all stayed connected. But I think conferences are critical to get that groundswell of knowledge and expertise under one roof and to get that commitment. And to your point, as exhibitors, it's great to hear that. And my goal has always been, if our members have one conference they can go to in a year, I want it to be the CGA show, because that is where we can make the greatest strides. You may have a colleague on the board of a one-call center that you've never met. You may have someone experiencing challenges in bilingual public awareness and didn't realize there's a toolkit. So we have worked incredibly hard to listen with big ears, reflect on the survey data, and build this brain trust of not only the best speakers, but, doubling the size of the expo floor and looking at technologies and doing live demos. And, from our inception coming out of the pandemic, I think we all use the pandemic as a reset button. Our attendance has increased 50% year over year. That trajectory is impossible to wrap your mind around in the meeting and events world. We're signing contracts for 2027 right now. And what does that look like? We also, it's funny, we don't want to get too big and lose that intimacy. Although once you get to 1,000 people, I don't know where there's any intimacy.
Right.
But, it's our goal to provide a tremendous amount of value to our attendees, but also provide the opportunity for CGA to be relevant to our exhibitors the other 51 weeks out of the year that you're CGA members. So we continue to look for additional opportunities to interact with our committee members, to get your insight on technical papers, to populate our committees. You've got access to so much data, so much knowledge, and so many connections of people that need to be involved in the damage prevention process for us to be successful. So, from our standpoint, the conference, I think, has changed the efforts that CGA has done dramatically. It's the place to be at. and people want to be there. And we're on pace this year to have a record-breaking crowd. Last year we had to cap attendance, and it wasn't a sight I wanted to see, but when you're walking down a hallway and seeing people sitting Indian style because they wanted to hear that lecture so badly. So we need to make sure that we plan accordingly and provide that opportunity and that pathway for everybody to gain that knowledge they're so much in need of.
Yeah, I one of the things I've always been proud of, and I think the CGA is one of the reasons that we feel the partnership is so strong, is it really is the opportunity for like-minded people to gather and share their ideas, and the ability to have our kind of education sessions and technology presentations and just communication is so valuable. But me personally, sometimes just walking down the hallway and seeing people and hearing conversations and shooting ideas in a post-COVID world, we really struggle to find those opportunities. And you're right. I don't think a lot of people want to spend a lot of time going to multiple places, just getting a little bit here and a little bit there. For me, I can go to the CGA conference and I get fulfilled not only the vendor opportunity, because we get to meet lots of clients, but we also get the opportunity to learn and kind of share. And what I've always walked away with out of those sessions is, especially when we bring our technical people, is how much insight they get on changes that they would like to see within inside of our industry. And they actually feel that there's a voice, that they have a voice and can be heard. And that's done through the committees the CGA have formed and the different groups that are out there. So I can't tell you in my career how valuable that entity has played into the formation of what we do as a company, but also I think is how the industry really sets a bar to judge itself and really try to perform and get better every year. I'm a huge fan of the 50 and 5.
Yeah.
I love the idea. You said something earlier about how the CGA really formed and was able to reduce with the 811 role, 50% of the damages. And now we sit here in a time where I think everybody's saying, yeah, we need to do something about these damages. The CGA is making a big push with 50 and 5. Tell me a little bit about that and how you see that kind of continuing the message of CGA for the future.
I think it was a revelation by our board of directors of, we're not going to be a passive association. This isn't just going to come with us. The low-hanging fruit is gone. To drive big change, we've got to start with us, and we reflected it internally. And I think putting a stake in the ground and giving people something to drive to has moved us light years ahead in the conversations. Much like I thought 811 gave us a new light on a kind of an old idea. Call before you dig's been around for 50 years, but all of a sudden 811 was relevant and it was newsworthy. Right. And it was, the lawmakers were looking at it as they could now wrap their head around what we were trying to accomplish. And I think the 50 and 5 initiative is doing that same thing. I think when you look at how we all need to work together and trying to really look at our data and chew this elephant one bite at a time, knowing that 6 root causes account for 74% of our damages. Every businessman knows that's where your ROI is. Let's go get it. So I think looking at it in those factors, looking at a big lens where laws may not be up to speed of where they need to be for folks to be able to make these gains. I think that's a big picture lens we're looking through right now. And I also think, the implementation of the Damage Prevention Institute. I think that's moving us yards ahead. When you have 1,000 excavators who want to submit their data and are proud of their safety record. And if you think of it as a NASDAQ ticker, they want to be at the top of that ticker. And
right.
For the first time ever, excavators were our largest submitter to the DIRT tool. We used to stand in the back of the room. I used to see I've got to go speak at a contractor event. And I kind of slink down and I'm like, oh, they're going to hate the way the data looks. And you know what? They did, but they decided to do something about it. And it's great to see, all the information that we have, the more than 1,000 professional excavators in the Damage Prevention Institute working through their accreditation and doing the right things. I mean, it's an exciting time to be part of something that you can really affect change. And I think that's important, no matter what your title is in your career, who you work for, what side of the boardroom or the shovel you're on, you can be an active participant in the CGA and move the needle. And I think for a lot of people, that's like a humbling point in their career to know that they can have that opportunity. And it also just never ceases to amaze me, the dedication.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got to be dedicated. Everybody's got real jobs. You know,
Yeah.
we are an association. We're asking for volunteer hours. We take you away from your families to travel. You know, we're interfering with your other work duties for our Zoom calls. But here you are wanting to do the right thing and lead change. So it's also very incredibly humbling to me year over year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I remember when I was younger, just starting to attend some of the meetings and sitting in the back of the room and thinking, oh, there's all these people that have been in this industry for so long with so much knowledge. I would love to be able to contribute. I just don't feel like I have a voice. And now, strangely enough, to be one of the older guys in the room now, the one that's been in the industry for a while, and looking over at you, who's had a similar experience, it's so interesting that not only do we have a voice into it, but we're trying to encourage other people to have a voice, because at least in my experience, what gave me the confidence in what I was doing in my work world was the fact that I was aligning because I heard similar stories being told in these committees in those areas. And it was interesting to me. I was sitting on committees with my competitors and then realizing how similar we are, and we have these same ideas, and working together, we could actually move that needle. So I think the brilliance of the CGA, especially with the 811 effort, was the fact that it gave us kind of a reason to rally behind and say that this is bigger than an individual. It's an important mission for why we're working so hard. So I will echo what you say. If you're out there and you're not sure, you can contribute, come to the CGA, join a committee, hop on it. It's one of the more rewarding things I do. The biggest challenge is there's too many committees. I want to be on so many. And I've learned that really find one or two and really focus on.
Right. And that's a very good point. You know, everybody's like, what do I have to do to join a CGA committee? It's not hard. You know, as long as you're a CGA member, you can join any committee you want to. And at our conference is a good way to dip your toe in the water. They are actually, you know, an hour and a half. You can come in as a visitor. You can listen to the task teams that are active, and there's something for everyone. And I think one of the cool things we're doing now that, you know, CGA is going to be 25 years old in 25. So this year we're actually doing a best practices live session, and it's going to be talking about how a best practice is made and actually reenact some of the great, I don't want to say robust discussions from the early days that you and I recall of, you know, I always laugh because people said, you'll be retired before cross-boards become a best practice. And you know what? I'm not. Here I am, and it's a best practice. So, but I think really walking people through the education process and what it takes, that everything we do is authentic and thoughtful. You know, there's a process behind it, but we're also nimble. This isn't, you know, you're not going to get waylaid in red tape. If there is a need to change, let's go change. So some people embrace it, some people run from it. And, you know, it's interesting to watch.
It's fun because as we started being on the tech side of this business has always been interesting, because we were trying to sell tech very much to people that weren't against it, but weren't used to it. And now to see generations coming in who have expectations much higher of what tech should be able to do and trying to deliver on those desires are great. One of the things that we saw, and you mentioned before, the DPI and education, we feel very strongly in that, but we kind of stumbled into that in our own accord as well. But we found how if we can be smarter and in our education, we can make difference in our software. So I'm a huge fan of the CGA and the DPI, because I believe once you create a message and you have an idea, you have to be able to deliver it and then validate it and then make sure people are actually competent in that. So having this opportunity now to really educate at the highest level, I think is a core component to reaching 50% reduction in 5 years. You know, it's one thing to have a great slogan. It's another thing to put effort behind it. And watching what the CGA is doing, I'm really happy that I'm seeing a big effort put into the education space on that. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That's curious. It's a kind of a new push by the CGA, and I'd like to hear more.
Sure. You know, education has always been an incredibly important part of what we do. You know, public awareness is more of the outreach, the branding, the creativity, but it's got to get down to the education and really understanding best practices and what you need to do to be safe and successful in your core business. And, you know, we're a big fan of research. and really scraping back the surface and peeling that onion one layer at a time, and really trying to understand how people consume information, how they learn, when they learn. Is it images? Is it, you look at all the factors that go into really trying to design and understand a campaign and effort initiative of how people want to be educated. It's a huge undertaking. It's very easy just to go build something without very little research. And your metrics will show you build it with very little research. It's such an investment upfront, but it pays off dividends in the end. And, I know that we're working in conjunction with PHMSA, and we've got a great task team working to build and launch this online excavator portal. And, it's another one of these things about change. You don't know what you don't know. I mean, the amount of data that we can see can be incredible. Just last week I was at Fence Tech. It's the American Fencing Association. And, I had to speak for 90 minutes. No one should ever have to listen to me for 90 minutes. So I work with our team, and we embedded, again, a bunch of live polling. And a lot of it was, the fencing contractors, there's little we can do. They dig in right-of-ways where utilities are buried. And, with the last time I spoke at that conference, that was all I heard. We made no progress. So this year I got in front of it and, really wanted to understand, is safety important? How do you consume training material? And, one of the 5 things they thought that could improve safety in their industry was more training. And I found that very interesting. And so we're going to replicate a lot of these polling questions in some of these smaller audiences. And you know what? And people are very open with what they like and what they don't like. 2 weeks ago, I was at the American Tent Association. And, someone came up to me and talked about the online ticketing for the state of Indiana and how great it was. And you know what? I just built a new house and I live down here in Florida, and I had to use it. And I'm like, I remember back in the day, I could just sit there on the phone forever. Now I can actually map my front yard. And it was crazy, the efficiencies. But it's great to see how technology and how it's going to interact with not only the being able to place the ticket, but understanding what you're supposed to do once that ticket is active. Right. There's more than 1 million active locates on any given day. It's a busy industry. It is a busy industry.
Absolutely. I guess I'm never amazed. I'm totally blown away at how many associations there are out there, and how many, a fence association and a tent association. Nowhere in my mind would I think, well, fence I get, tent I didn't really think about. But obviously, anytime you're doing anything that penetrates the ground, that affects us. It affects our members. It affects that. And so it takes somebody to get out and have those conversations, which I don't think we had that voice 20 years ago, right? It was kind of fend for yourself. And now here you are talking to these groups. I think it's amazing. One of the things that you brought up, which I'm a big fan of, is this just total amount of data, right, that we're working in today. It's, for years, we were just happy to be able to create a ticket and make sure that it got to its destination, right? We were happy. And then we were happy that somebody would actually put positive response and tell me that they did something. That's great. But now we look at the world and we're talking about, this AR 360, multiple conversations, interactions. But now we're collecting so much more data that we can make better decisions off of. And I think this is, to me, what we saw, how GIS revolutionized creating a ticket. This is the next significant revolution, is by using great data to make much better insights and decisions on what we're doing. I think the CGA is so critical in this process because, as most people know with data, we need to know kind of action and reaction. And in our world, reaction usually, unfortunately, is an incident, a damage, something that has happened. And the CGA is really the guardian of really the only completely open data set for damages right now with the DIRT tool. So I hope the CGA continues to do that and grow that area, because I believe strongly in the fact that having that data and then comparing it with the ticket data will give us the insight to make better decisions. I'm curious, from a technology standpoint, what kind of initiatives does the CGA have moving forward? I know education's a big one. Are there any other things we should look forward down the road?
There's a big push to revamp the DIRT tool, the damage information reporting tool. And that's the free online secure web-based portal to submit your damage and near miss data. It's scrubbed from you as an individual. It's scrubbed from you as a company. The whole goal is to understand the root cause of why damages are occurring. And, it's the old adage of knowledge is power. And the more data we have, the better, safer outcomes we can manage. We are constantly pushing to have all that information into the system and be able to mine it effectively and produce thoughtful outcomes and actually move the yardsticks. Not just theoretically, this is what the data tells us, but the data told us this and we're going to go improve it by doing ABC. So, we've got folks working on the technology end. Then you have those that are mining the data. Once the data comes out, we might need to modify a best practice. I was in a room last week and I had 3 people ask me what potholing meant. You also can't underestimate just the base level of knowledge, and you need to have those conversations. And I found that fascinating. And it wasn't semantics. It wasn't using the wrong word. They just didn't know they had to do that. And it was multiple states. So it wasn't just a state law. So, really understanding and reacting like, well, if we're telling people to pothole and they just are skipping that because they don't know what it means, perhaps that's part of an educational component we need to focus on. And then it goes out building the campaigns and ultimately maybe changing the best practices. So, there's huge initiatives in the mapping industry. I think one of the other really fascinating topics that we're building around is our next practices of what's the new technology out there. We're talking to companies now that are doing load shares in SpaceX, sending back a terabyte full of data every second. When did you ever see 811 going to be in a rocket ship? And we did put a sticker on the box, by the way. I made sure that happened when that launched. Never miss an opportunity. We're going to have the first sticker in Mars. But, we needed a place for those folks to land, for the big thinkers, the Rod Radars out there doing, the live dig demo and, all the, like what you, AI, VR, the ticket screen, predictive analytics. They needed a safe place to be because that's where we're going to make our gains.
Yeah. Yeah, without a doubt. It's fun to sit here now and think, before we used to think, how do we make this particular process better? And now we sit back and say, how do we solve this problem, right? And it's a very different mindset. And I think what you say is so encouraging because now we can look at big data. We can create models to see if we think what we believe is going to happen actually happens. We can track performance. We can alter midstream to get better at it. When you start behaving like that, it's my belief that you invite more people to the table to have the conversation. When you have an industry that wants to look forward and grow, that brings more people to the table. And so I don't think we could have ever gotten there without having a united voice. So me personally have been so excited that the work the CGA has done moving forward with the conference, but the work that has been done in the past to get us to this point has allowed companies like ours to really excel in this market. So we're incredibly grateful for the CGA. I know the members that we work with, that is who we look to help us guide what our goals and challenges should be. So from that standpoint, I find the CGA to be an invaluable organization and hope that our members also see that and continue to support it the way that we've seen in the last few years. I think the group that's really handling the CGA's growth now is amazing. I'm really excited. I guess to kind of close all this up, I know we've got the big show coming up later this year. So why don't you go ahead and some information about that? Tell us anything else that we might not know about what's going on out in Colorado. And then I'll let you finish.
Sure. And you said that about getting access to big data. And it was interesting. I had a call last week with a company, and by name and website, I couldn't figure out their connection to CGA. And they asked me if I ever use cruise control. And I said, I do. And they said, when you have the lane departure warning? I said, yes, we're the largest mapper of that in the automotive industry. And if we can map that, we can map pipelines. And I was like, interesting segue. And that's the kind of brain trust and startup companies that we need interested in damage prevention. And we need companies like Irth just pushing the envelope and, just amplifying our safety message with their clients, their customers, their partners. It's critical to everything we're going to do. And the big culmination will be April 14th through the 18th in Colorado Springs at the historic Broadmoor Hotel. It's an awesome place to network. 315,000 square feet of meeting space. It's a big, big place, but we'll have a small environment for all of us to share our information. So if you go to cgaconference.com, there's more information there, and you can, it's for registration and getting pricing, and also for more information on anything we spoke to about committees, about best practices, or even my contact information. You can visit commongroundalliance.com, and just an email or a phone call away. And it was fun to take a little stroll down memory lane with you today, Jason. You've been a big part of my life for many years, and it's kind of fun to think about. We're starting to be the old timers now, man.
It's scary. I remember looking at the going, I'm never going to be that guy. And now sitting there going, oh my God, I'm that guy. It's weird. I will say this though. The CGA is great. What I think often sometimes get lost when you start having the organizations or the individuals. And what's so nice about the CGA, at least from my standpoint, is all the individuals are really accessible. It's so nice to be able to have a conversation with you or Sarah or anyone on the team. But it's also one of the things that makes the conference so stand out to me. The Night of Networking is one of the best events that I've ever done professionally. And the fact that it's a non-pressured event with people with like goals and commonalities can just hang out and interact. And I can see the president of the CGA there. I can see the vice president of marketing there, and they're having a good time, and it's very approachable. So for me, I feel that this is an industry that's worthwhile the investment of my time, because I can see when my effort makes a difference. And I think that has been so much more emphasized with the organization of the CGA. So we're so grateful that you guys have really taken the ball and run with it. So happy what you've done with the conferences. And I personally am so happy where you are in your career. It's been great to see the evolution of Khrysanne from when we used to hang out in good old Ohio to where we are today. And at least it's sunny there. It looks like where you're at. So yeah. I will put all your contact information will be available with this podcast as well. So if you want to reach out to Khrysanne, I'm sure she'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions for me, my contact information will be here below. Khrysanne, thank you so much for spending a few minutes with us today. I look forward to seeing you in Colorado.
Thanks for all you do, Jason. Take care, everybody.
Take care.